Well then, welcome back to the final episode of A Splash of Paint. Now it's time to go out and about again for the second part of our feature on digital sketching and painting. Hi there folks, and welcome to Cookney in Derbyshire. What a brilliant place for painting and drawing. I've got my tablet computer and my brush stylus, and I'm going to show you how to paint a digital painting of this fantastic landscape. Let's get started. And the first thing I want to do is actually choose a relevant sky colour. Now there's a lot of cloud out there, some nice grey clouds. We're going to try and get some of those. So we'll tap on the colour selector in the corner there. I'm going to come down to the blues on the colour wheel. Choose the blue from the top corner, and then reduce the opacity so it's kind of around about 50-60%. And then I've got the brush stylus, which is brilliant. This really makes it feel like you're painting. We'll zoom out a fraction more, and we'll go for the blue background. So we'll work it across. We'll come down probably a quarter to a third. So back into this area there, I can now reduce the opacity by moving this slider to almost a third down, and then continue this, go back in again and reduce it again, and keep working down in this way until it kind of fades to nothing. To add some clouds, we'll change colour, and I will choose white from the presets. The opacity could be fairly low for these, sort of 2/3 up, something like that, and make the brush size smaller by moving this slider in the centre. So we're talking about 80, something like that. And do little swirls. Let's zoom in a bit closer so we can see what's happening. When I zoomed in just then, I ran the finger over, which caused a problem. So we need to undo that. And then I'm just going to do these little twists, sort of cotton wool kind of cloud effect. Let's zoom out a fraction. 2 fingers for zooming out. Then we're going to twist across. This is a good kind of generic sky effect that you can bring in. Just a few gentle sweeps below, and you can see the clouds starting to appear there. And then what we can actually do is just put a few thin sweeps lower down and reduce the opacity of the white. Use this for blending and for putting some finer areas of cloud. Let's choose a bit of a grey by moving the spot into the grey area. Opacity still pretty low. Just going to go in, pinch to zoom, and let's just add a few shadows to the bottoms of some of these clouds. It's quite addictive, this, especially with the brush, because it really makes it feel like actual sketching or painting. Now if I want to add some land to this, what I can do is add a new layer to this, which is in the bottom right corner. We tap this and there's a little plus. And we're now working on a separate layer, which means if we make a mistake on this, we can just delete the layer and start again, as opposed to going right back to the beginning. If we look at the landscape, it's a greeny yellow. So we'll start off with a yellowy tinge. Change the colour, lower the opacity. I've changed the colour, made it more of a red tinge to the green, and we can keep doing this. Just bring it slightly towards the red area, bringing it lower down on this scale. It lets me add the dark bits to the corners, but I'm still working on a relatively medium to low opacity, and I'm going to reduce the brush size as we get further back. As we go further back, it gets colder, more towards a grey, so we'll come even further over on the colour picker there. Maybe even a smaller brush again, and a lower opacity. It's better to build the opacity up low rather than go full on. Now this grey wants to blend in with the green, so reducing the opacity really low and making the brush a bit bigger will let me do that. So it's creating a graduation almost, darken some of the corners. So you can see we've almost made a landscape there, albeit basic. And what we can actually do now is we can go in and use the brush quite small and start to paint in a few distant trees. Just going to change the settings again by reducing the intensity a touch there, and make the brush smaller as well. So little tiny spots, very small brush. Just putting little bits of texture on, creating the effect of the distant trees. A few sweeps going across. Keep playing around with the opacity, because that's the secret to this. The opacity allows it to all blend together, creating just a few little spots in the background is almost enough to give the impressions of trees. But it's all, for me, about brush size and opacity working together, working as a team. Now I'm just using this brush to add a little bit of foreground detail, a little bit of lighter opacity there. Just blend all this into the landscape that surrounds it. And you can, in no time, in 5-10 minutes, you can create a nice little effect of a distant sketch picture there. So there you go, folks. Hopefully that's given you an insight on how to use your tablet computer and do some digital art. It's a great way of sketching on the fly, because most people carry these things around with them. And of course you can get these on the smartphones as well. You can use just your finger if you want to, or you can use the actual brush stylus. But have some fun and enjoy it. So there you go, folks. If you've got a tablet, why not have a practice yourself and have some fun? And remember, we're always keen to see how you get on. Why not upload examples of your work on the community section of the SAA website? Just visit saa.co.uk for details. Now it's time for today's Art Bite project. Let's join watercolour wonder Jeff Kersey as he shares his secret for painting light over dark using colour and tone.
Today I'd like to show you how to do a light against dark in watercolour. Now, of course, in general, in watercolour, you paint from light to dark. You wouldn't go putting light over a dark colour. But there are one or two instances, like for instance here, where you might have some really dark, dense undergrowth in a dark green or a brown, but the light is catching a few leaf shapes in front of that. So the best way to do it is to let your dark colour get completely dry, and then use a couple of watercolours that are known for being opaque. A particularly good one is lemon yellow, and this is a very opaque colour, but of course it's only opaque when it's straight out of the tube. The more water you add to it, the more transparent it becomes. So it's important that you do use this straight out of the tube. And this is just neat lemon yellow on a number 4 brush, and I'm holding the brush with my thumb at one side of the handle and 4 fingers at the other, so I can lay the flat of the brush against the paper and get the rough texture of the paper, take advantage of that rough texture. And we'll just put a few. It's better if you take some of the paint off so it's not too wet, and you can see how you can just get the effect of some foliage or leaves against the dark. Now that's just one colour. Another thing you can do is to take Naples yellow, which is also very opaque, has quite a lot of white in it, and add that to the lemon yellow. And that can be useful if you want it opaque, but you want to take that sort of acid off the lemon yellow, because it can be very strong, very overpowering. So it's slightly whiter, this, and let's have a look what this could look like. Again, take a little bit off so that your brush isn't too clogged up with paint, and that you can see that's lighter. It's got a bit more white in it, and it's a lighter colour. And there's quite a few variations in this. I mean, if I clean the brush, a nice colour sometimes is to get like a grey-green, almost like a hosta colour. And if I take a bit of viridian and add that to this, and a little bit of cerulean blue, a bit more of the Naples yellow, I get like a sort of grey-green. And I'm going to just take some of that off the brush again so it's not wet through, and just put that in again. That works against the dark green background. Now if it was autumn, for instance, we could take again, maybe again we could take lemon yellow, neat lemon yellow, and I'm adding some cadmium yellow to it, which makes it slightly more orange. Any cadmium colour is a good one to use because that is also opaque, or at least semi-opaque, and that gives us a nice opaque thick colour again, but slightly more orange. In fact, you could even add a little bit of burnt sienna to it to redden it a bit. And then again, I don't want too much paint on the brush or the marks won't be subtle at all, and then that one there could be used as a definite autumn orange. And you can vary it. If we were to put a bit more burnt sienna in it to redden it, you'd see a different colour coming in altogether. And this can be useful for masses of foliage with fairly dark strong shadows behind. And it's not just the side of the brush either. If there was a bush or a tree nearer to you where you could actually start to make out a few little leaf shapes, a brush like the liner writer is ideal for this, but you could pick up the body colour, the opaque colour there, and maybe with the tip of the liner writer brush you can actually pick out leaf shapes, little dashes. They work best against the really dark areas, but you can pick out a few actual leaves using this method. Now sometimes you might want to put some light coloured grasses or twigs and branches, particularly twigs and branches. It might be in a woodland scene, it might be in a hedgerow, something like that. And these twigs and branches are lighter than the background. And I find a good way to do this is scratching out. Not a difficult process, but the timing is crucial. So I'll just show you how I would approach this. Let's start by mixing a rich dark colour. I've got some burnt umber and some ultramarine blue for a real rich dark brown. Obviously, if you're scratching out against a background, then the little marks you make are far more noticeable against a dark background. So let's just put some of that in around here. Just getting it nice and strong, nice and solid. Now the timing is important. If you scratch the little marks out to represent, say, twigs and branches, while the paint's too wet, it just runs back in. If you scratch it out when it's too dry, you tend to just dig lumps out of the paper and you don't get the effect. So I'm just waiting a few moments for it to dry. And you don't want it to be totally dry. It's almost on the cusp of drying, but still damp. And then I've got a craft knife here. Really good sharp point to it, because it depends how you use the point as to how thinner or thicker line you get. So I'm going to do a bit of scratching out there. And if I put more of the flat of the blade to the paper, I get a wider line. But if I use more of the tip of it, I get a thinner line. It's also good, this, for, say, you've got a mass of silver birches in a woodland scene, something like that. Let's do a few more. It's a little early. I think they're filling in, so let's try and... I've waited a moment so it's a bit drier, and let's try bringing some out. See, they have more impact when it's that bit drier. And you can do quite a mass of them. But obviously it's the sort of effect that can look a little bit gimmicky if you overdo it.
Great exercise there for working opaque watercolours to add highlights and details. Thanks, Jeff. Now it's time for a quick break, folks, but join us in part 3 when versatile artist Pip McGarry returns to demonstrate how to use oils to wash, brush and comb some tiger's fur. We'll see you soon.